A face that refuses to age, a voice that won't stop smiling, and a woman who, after half a century under hot lights, suddenly stepped off the stage of the internet in April 2025, leaving behind a storm of side-by-side photos and accusations that she'd been rebuilt. But this story doesn't start with a surgeon's scalpel. It begins in a house run like a barracks, with a little girl drilled before dawn and taught that applause wasn't a gift, it was rent. Before Marie Osmond ever learned what childhood felt like, she learned what a contract sounded like. At 14, she detonated onto radio with a country pop prayer called Paper Roses, and the world crowned her sweet and spotless. Backstage, the numbers were harder. 18-hour days, a starving scale, a producer's hissed insult in a parking lot that branded itself into a teenager's brain. The industry loved her smile. It did not love her softness. And so the body became a battlefield. Make it smaller, make it brighter, make it last. Then came the mythological highs. Television confetti, Vegas marathons, a porcelain doll empire stitched to private collapses, injuries, and the kind of grief that drives you to the edge of the map. Years later, when she spoke out about postpartum depression, she shattered a taboo and saved strangers she'd never meet. Yet the same culture that applauded her survival demanded something impossible: to look like yesterday forever. So ask yourself, when the public says a woman is aging backwards, what are we really seeing? A miracle? A mask? Or the cost of a lifetime sold in close-up? This isn't a makeover story. It's a case file on fame, control, and the American obsession with youth, told through the one person who has worn all three like stage makeup and armor.
Marie Osmond's story begins far from the glamour of Las Vegas stages or glossy magazine covers. She was born on October 13, 1959, in Ogden, Utah, the only daughter among 9 children in a devout Mormon family. Her very existence was seen as a miracle. 2 of her older brothers had been born completely deaf, and doctors warned her parents, George and Olive, to stop having children. Yet they pressed forward, guided by faith. When Marie arrived with perfect hearing, they believed it was a sign from God. But blessings came tangled in hardship. The Osmond household was poor, weighed down by medical bills and failed business ventures. George, a former Army man, ran his home with military severity. Mornings began with a bugle call from her brothers, and every response required "Yes, sir," or "Thank you, sir." Fun was forbidden. Discipline and rehearsal ruled the day. For Marie, there was no such thing as playtime. At 3 years old, while other children learned to color, she was memorizing Swedish songs for overseas tours. Childhood, for her, was an illusion. By 1963, the Osmonds were financially desperate. They mortgaged their farm and moved to Los Angeles with little more than determination and debt. George had already lost the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars in today's money. Some nights the family slept in cars, and in those moments the weight of survival fell onto the shoulders of a child. Marie did not sing for joy. She sang because if she didn't, her family wouldn't eat. Her earliest memories are not of dolls or storybooks, but of contracts, auditions, and scripts she couldn't even read yet. By 4 years old, she was appearing on The Andy Williams Show. Most audiences found her adorable. Behind the curtain, however, producers demanded grueling rehearsals and even made comments about her weight. For a little girl still learning her alphabet, the message was searingly clear. Her body and her talent were products for sale. The Osmonds' relentless march toward fame had begun, and Marie, the youngest daughter, had already been drafted into a life where applause was currency and innocence was expendable.
By the time Marie Osmond was old enough to hold a doll, she was already holding a microphone. At just 4 years old, she stood beneath studio lights on The Andy Williams Show. To the public, she was an adorable novelty, the tiny sister of the Osmond brothers. But behind the curtain, the stakes were crushing. She rehearsed 18-hour days, memorized scripts she couldn't even read yet, and balanced school lessons in the cracks of a performer's schedule. Childhood was not a stage of life for Marie. It was a stage set, and she was expected to perform. The family's survival depended on it. Her brother's 5-year contract was worth tens of thousands of dollars, a fortune in the 1960s. But Marie's place in the act wasn't guaranteed. Every smile, every note, every routine was a test. Could the youngest Osmond be profitable? Even at 4, the answer had to be yes. And then came the comments that cut deeper than any rehearsal. Producers whispered about her body, calling her chubby, warning her to slim down. Imagine hearing those words before you can even spell them. That was Marie's initiation into Hollywood, a world where a little girl's worth could be measured on a scale. By 1967, Marie had become a regular on the show, officially drafted into the Osmond machine. While other children played outside, she traveled in cramped trailers, sang in languages she barely understood, and learned to track ticket sales alongside her mother. By the age of 10, she wasn't just a performer. She was a business partner in her family's survival. The spotlight had found her early, but it wasn't the warm glow of a dream fulfilled. It was the harsh glare of necessity. And Marie Osmond, barely a child, was already learning that in Hollywood, innocence is expendable when profits are at stake.
By the dawn of the 1970s, the Osmonds had become a household name. In 1971, their single One Bad Apple shot to #1, selling over 1 million copies and catapulting the family into the ranks of pop royalty. For a moment, the Osmond brothers were being compared to the Beatles. But while her brothers basked in the spotlight, Marie was quietly pushed to the side, branded merely the sister in a family of boys. That changed in August 1973, when 14-year-old Marie recorded Paper Roses. The song was an instant sensation, #1 on the country charts, #5 on the Billboard Hot 100, and #2 in the UK. It sold over 500,000 copies and turned the shy Mormon teenager into a global star. Practically overnight, she wasn't just Donny's little sister. She was Marie Osmond, the breakout solo act. But the price of glory was steep. Her record label insisted she sing songs written for adults, not teenagers. They wanted to sell her as mature, polished, and safe. Marie loved traditional country, but executives steered her into glossy pop ballads aimed at older fans. She had no say. To the world, Paper Roses was a triumph. To Marie, it was the beginning of being pulled away from her own voice. Still, the ride was spectacular. She appeared on magazine covers, toured internationally, and collected awards, all before her sweet 16. Fans screamed her name in Japan with Beatlemania intensity. Her family's financial crisis seemed like a distant memory. The Osmonds now owned homes in Utah and California, and Donny had gadgets in his bedroom that looked like props from a spy film. Yet behind the cheers, the machine demanded more. More songs, more shows, more money. At just 15, Marie was already exhausted, her voice faltering from overuse. Doctors warned she had vocal damage usually seen in seasoned adults. But the world didn't want to hear about the cracks. They wanted the roses, paper or not. Marie Osmond was living every teenager's fantasy of fame, but she was also learning that glory in Hollywood rarely comes without a hidden cost. For Marie Osmond, fame had never been a fairy tale. It was a contract written in sleepless nights and hunger pangs.
By 1974, the cracks in her carefully manufactured image began to show. At just 15, her vocal cords revealed damage doctors usually saw in seasoned performers. The diagnosis was brutal. She had sung herself into exhaustion. Canceled shows meant panic for the family brand, and Marie found herself struggling to force notes out on stage, tears welling as she realized her voice, her lifeline, was slipping away. But the spotlight demanded more. In 1976, she and Donny launched The Donny and Marie Show. The smiles, balloons, and cheerful duets masked a darker truth. Marie was working 18-hour days, studying with tutors between shoots, then collapsing into bed only to rise again. Producers told her she was too heavy, at 103 pounds. They ordered her to lose 10 more or face cancellation. At 16, she began starving herself, her weight plunging to a dangerous 93 pounds. The girl who once sang of roses was now withering under Hollywood's gaze. The torment didn't end with the mirror. In parking lots, producers humiliated her, calling her a fat pig. Each insult carved deeper into her psyche, seeding decades of body dysmorphia. And still she performed. Even after collapsing on set in 1978, dehydrated and faint from exhaustion, the Osmond machine spun the story into silence. To the world, Marie was flawless. Behind the curtain, she was breaking. Creative conflicts only added fuel to the fire. By the late 70s, Marie wanted to experiment. Disco, modern sounds, her own artistic voice. Her brothers resisted, accusing her of jeopardizing the brand. Family loyalty clashed with personal identity. Marie was trapped. Betray her own instincts, or betray the family that had built her. Underneath the glitter, the applause, and the perfect smile, Marie Osmond was living the quintessential Hollywood nightmare, praised as America's sweetheart while being punished for being human.
The late 1970s and early 1980s marked the unraveling of Marie Osmond's carefully polished image. The Donny and Marie Show, once a ratings powerhouse, slipped into decline. In 1979, it was canceled, a devastating blow to the Osmond family empire. For Marie, the end of the show was more than a career setback. It was a public reminder that fame, no matter how bright, is fleeting. She turned to acting, hoping to reinvent herself, but Hollywood was unkind. In 1982, she stepped onto Broadway as Maria in a revival of The Sound of Music. The reviews were merciless, describing her performance as flat, lifeless, and unconvincing. The production closed early. It was a humiliation that haunted her for years. When she returned to Broadway in the 1990s, she carried the scars of that first failure like a shadow. Her personal life mirrored the turbulence of her career. In 1982, she married basketball player Stephen Craig in a highly publicized ceremony. Within 3 years, the marriage crumbled amid accusations of mental cruelty. The divorce was splashed across tabloids, and Marie, barely in her 20s, was branded as damaged goods by a press that never forgave imperfection. Her second marriage to music producer Brian Blosel seemed like a fresh start. Together, they raised 8 children, biological and adopted. But behind closed doors, Marie's battles with mental health raged on. After the birth of her son Matthew in 1999, she slipped into a terrifying depression. Shaking, spiraling, she abandoned her family for 3 days, driving aimlessly along the California coast. She later admitted she believed her children would be better off without her. And then came the darkest tragedy of all. In 2010, her 18-year-old son Michael leapt to his death from a Los Angeles apartment building. The loss shattered Marie. At his funeral, she clung to her family, but the grief never fully healed. Years later, she confessed that part of her had died with him. The tabloids called it scandal. The public called it tragedy. But for Marie Osmond, it was simply survival in the face of relentless heartbreak. Proof that even America's sweetheart could not escape the curse of Hollywood's brutal cycle: rise, glory, collapse.
For most stars, the fall is permanent. But Marie Osmond has never been most stars. Time and again, when the world thought she had been broken beyond repair, she returned, recast, reinvented, and somehow stronger. Her first great comeback came in 1985, when she leaned back into her country roots. The album There's No Stopping Your Heart lived up to its title, producing 2 #1 singles and reminding audiences that her voice still carried power, even if her spirit was scarred. Soon after, she became a Nashville regular, touring relentlessly, playing anywhere that would have her. But it wasn't only music that resurrected her. In the mid-1980s, she launched an unlikely empire, porcelain dolls on QVC. What might have looked like a vanity project became a juggernaut, selling millions of units and earning her more than $50 million. The girl who had once been treated as a product was now in control of her own brand. Then, in 2008, Marie and Donny reunited in Las Vegas for a residency at the Flamingo Hotel. What was supposed to be a short run became an astonishing 11-year success story. 1,230 shows, record ticket sales, and a theater renamed in their honor. The Osmonds were back, but this time it was Marie's resilience that defined the act. Equally important was her decision to speak publicly about what nearly destroyed her. Her 2001 book, Behind the Smile, exposed her battle with postpartum depression and suicidal thoughts. In doing so, she gave a voice to millions of women silenced by stigma. Later, as a spokesperson for Nutrisystem, she reframed her lifelong struggles with body image, not as shame, but as survival. Through the heartbreak, the failures, and even the tragedies, Marie Osmond became more than a pop star. She became a cultural symbol of endurance, proof that even under the crushing weight of fame, reinvention is possible. Her legacy is not just the songs or the shows. It is the courage to survive when the world insists you smile.
Marie Osmond's journey is not just a tale of music charts, Vegas lights, or porcelain dolls. It's a story about survival in an industry that demands perfection while punishing humanity. She has faced the applause, the criticism, the heartbreak, and the whispers of aging backwards, yet still stands as proof that reinvention is possible even when the world wants you frozen in time. But the final question remains. When you look at Marie Osmond today, do you see a woman defying age, or do you see the scars of a lifetime spent under the microscope of fame? Is this transformation a triumph of resilience, or the ultimate price of Hollywood's obsession with youth? Tell us what you think. Was Marie's ageless face her greatest comeback, or the most tragic mask of all? Share your thoughts below, because the story of Marie Osmond is still being written. And if you believe more secrets of Hollywood's brightest stars should be uncovered, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Beyond the Red Carpet, and join us for the next chapter of The Shadows Behind the Spotlight.